Good morning, and here is me back in my trailer. How are you this morning? I am super excited to be here. I've got a little bit of discombobulation going on this morning, but we are starting our new series. Our new series is all about the strong women of the Bible, and I'm super excited because we're starting off right at the very beginning. Just like Julie Andrews says, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, and we are starting off with Eve. And we are talking, like I said, about the strong women of the Bible. And in doing that, I want you to realize that the strong women of the Bible are not necessarily what you think. When you look at people like Eve, right? We all blame Eve. I mean, every time something goes wrong with a woman or by a woman, we blame Eve, right? So my challenge for you today is, as we start talking about these women of the Bible, and there are hundreds of women mentioned in the Bible, about 100 of them by name, and we're going to go through each of these each week. So this week is all about Eve, right? So one of the things that I want to talk about is, a lot of times we wander through life and we don't think that we really have a purpose. We think we're just here to be a helpmate. Well, I'm going to flip the helpmate thing a little bit on its ear. And part of that goes back to earlier this year, I was sitting at a mastermind, and my friend Danielle was talking about how uh, Solomon had all of this wisdom, and she just jokingly said, except when it came to women, right? And we all kind of giggled. But then I really got to thinking about, what if the biggest lie we as women believed was that we were powerless, that we had no strength, that we weren't allowed to have a voice. And when you dig into the Bible a little bit more, you start to learn a lot more about what God thought of his beautiful creation of women. So, like I said, there was a time I believed that I was just extra. I was just an afterthought. I was not essential. I was only there to serve, support, cheer on others. That I really was just a gap filler, kind of like DAP, the DAP you put on the wall to fill in a crack. That's really what I felt like. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you feel overlooked, wondering if your voice, your presence, your being matters. But we as women are often labeled as helpers. And depending on how that word has been taught, that label might feel limiting, right? Like we're a behind the scenes, less than. Uh, Maybe we're just an extra in somebody else's story. We get those movie crews here in the Fort Worth area quite often, especially with Landman and The Chosen and uh, uh, 1923, all of that stuff. We get all of that here quite often. They're always putting out a call for extras. But don't we all want to be a star of some sort, in some way, in our own story? See, we serve everyone. We serve family, business, ministry, and yet somewhere we're just wonderful, useful, or even powerful, or if we're just here to serve somebody else's power, right? So today we're going to look at Genesis 2, 18 through 22. And in here, it says, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper corresponding to him.' The Lord God formed out of the ground every wild animal and every bird of the sky, and brought each to the man to see what he would call it. And whatever the man called a living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the livestock of the birds of the sky and to every wild animal, but for the man no helper was found corresponding to him. So the Lord caused a deep sleep to come over the man, and he slept. God took one of his ribs and closed the flesh at that place. Then the Lord God made the rib he had taken from the man into a woman and brought her to the man. So with that, there is a word in there that is a Hebrew word. When they're using the word helper in Hebrew, that's ezer. And I may not pronounce that right because I got a Southern accent and, I just make up the pronunciations as I go. But ezer, E-Z-E-R. And this is huge. It's the same word the Bible uses to describe God as our rescuer, our protector, and our defender. Did you hear what I just said? Ezer, the helper word that we've all been told that we're supposed to be just behind the scenes and not seen, and we're just supposed to be quiet and all this stuff, shows that we're a rescuer, a protector, and a defender. Those are very bold helper moves, right? It's not passive. It's power. You weren't created as a less than. You were created as a and then, and a stand beside, a fully equipped, fully capable, fully essential part of God's story. You are not extra. You're essential. You're strategically placed and purposely formatted just for what you were created for. So I want you to ask yourself, where have I allowed someone else's definition of helper to shrink who I am? What labels have I been wearing that God has never given me? I mean, if you just look at what we just said, that we are formed as rescuers, protectors, and defenders, we have all accepted labels that God never gave us. We've accepted labels that man has given us. And then ask yourself, what might change in my life, my leadership, my relationships, if I believed I was divinely designed to stand in strength? Because that's the truth. Every one of those things I listed were strong things, powerful things. We talk about the mama bear effect. That is because it was innately designed into us, right? Don't ever back down from that. It's the truth. You weren't an afterthought. You were the answer to something God himself said wasn't good. And that's isolation. No one should be isolated. And we as women isolate ourselves so much. You are the solution, not a side note. So let's start stepping into our power together, right? Let's stop apologizing for being strong, for being wise, for being necessary, for being present. Let's own our place, our power, our purpose, not to dominate, but to partner with God's plan for our life. Imagine a generation of women who know they are essential and they act like it. We're starting that movement right here with this video, with this study of all the women in the Bible and all of their strengths that don't get talked about from mainstream pulpits, that don't get talked about in mainstream Bible studies. We're talking about it because we're digging deep. And we're going to start walking through this together. And we may ruffle some feathers. And that old quote says, well-behaved women never wrote history. Well, think about that. Eve was the first not well-behaved woman. And so we're going to talk a little bit about her decisions and how she stood by them and how she was blamed for them. But this is not about bashing men. This is not about bashing anybody. It's about shining the light on the goodness of God and what he created when he created women. My husband and I got to see a concert this weekend, and Jody Messina was the concert. It was a 1990s country music concert, right? Loved every bit of it. But one of the things that I really wanted to hear her sing was Reckless Love. And I think we sing that song because we are desiring the reckless love of God, but we've already got it. We got it when He created us because He knew that we were essential. When I used to train admins for our pastors that at the church I worked at, my number one thing I would tell them is they were to protect their pastor even from themselves. That goes right along with what we're studying here today, that we are rescuers, protectors, and defenders. That is an essential being. We are to have a voice to our husbands. We are to have a voice to men in our life because we have a unique perspective that we can see, that we can call out to help protect them. So all week this week is all about Eve. And no, it's not that TV show. It's about finding our strength, going back to the very beginning and finding out the purpose for which we were created for. So we will see you tomorrow as we talk more about Eve. See you then. Bye now.